Jerusalem skyline right now. That's the Jerusalem skyline. That is the Jerusalem skyline from AFP. Jerusalem skyline right now. This is the Jerusalem skyline. You're looking at the Jerusalem skyline. That is live video from Jerusalem. Look at the thing coming down. Look at that. Jerusalem skyline. From AFP, Jerusalem skyline. Live video. You're looking at live video from the Jerusalem skyline right now. There may have been some interceptions there. I don't know. There were rocket alerts in northern and southern Israel that just happened. There were rocket alerts. Again, this is Jerusalem right here. This is the Jerusalem skyline via AFP. Wow. So recently, hang on a second here. Hang on. So it looks like, yes, CNN is saying that the Iron Dome intercept some Iranian drones. CNN reports that the Iron Dome, which is, that's going to be firing over Israeli airspace, intercepted some Iranian drones. So maybe some drones or missiles just got intercepted right now. Just about like, oh, hold on, there's another video here. What is this one? I'm seeing another video. Guys, hang on, I'm going to switch videos. I'm going to switch videos here. If I can, I'm going to switch videos. I have another video for you from AFP. I have another video for you of Israel. So give me a moment. Let me try to get that other video up. I am seeing stuff on that video. I'm seeing stuff on that video. Hang on. I got to get it up for you. I got to refresh here. Let's see if this works. Can I get you the other video from Israel? Here it is. It's a different video of showing Israel skyline. Hang on. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming right now. Coming up. There it is. That's it right there. That's a live video. That is live video from AFP. It is moving around the sky, looking around. This is in Israel. We have a live video, a second live video. Sorry, the camera is panning around right now, so you can't see that much. It's just like dark there. You'll see something in a moment. Give me a second here. Turn that off. So I got to get, let me fix this here. Let me just fix this, try to get you this video here. One moment. For whatever reason, can't get you that right now. Why is that not working? Trying to show you this video right now. But it's not showing you what I want to show you. That's the one from Tel Aviv, but there's another one I want to show you. Oh, you know what? I think it's just not showing much right now. That's what's going on. So, no, it is. Let me just try refreshing it again. I want to get you this other video shot via AFP. Whatever reason, that one isn't showing up as well as the first one. I'm on my left. Oh, there it is. I got it. There it is. There it is. That's it. That's it. That's it. So it looked like there were some intercepts there too. That is a live shot right there from eastern Israel. skyline of eastern Israel. That's a live shot via AFP, looking in the sky, panning around. So about half an hour ago, 20 minutes, oh, look at that, right there, look at that. Something falling out of the sky. Things falling out of the sky right now. That's a live video. That's live from AFP. There's things, looks like they're being intercepted. You just saw it live. This is AFP says this is eastern Israel. View from skyline of eastern Israel from the center of the country as Iran launches attack.
Over the 7th, there are daily exchanges between the Israeli military and Hezbollah, but very unusual here. It seems to have gone quiet at the moment. We're seeing more interceptions overhead, but I'm assuming, because the sirens have gone off, that the main danger has passed. But you have to remember, with those sirens, most Israelis in Jerusalem will be heading for bomb shelters. Kind of drills. The Home Front Command has been warning them throughout the day that this situation could arise. We know that schools have been cancelled tomorrow and for the days going forwards. But that's the scene here, Barbara, in Jerusalem. Interceptions in the skies above us. Another explosion there in the distance. Told, of course, that these drones that had been sent from Iran, this phalanx of more than 100 drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, would hit or come towards Israeli airspace by about 2 o'clock, which is around, of course, now. We're waiting, of course, to see what this means going forwards. It's unclear at this stage whether there are going to be more drones, whether there are also going to be missiles. There have been reports that missiles have been launched, but it's not been confirmed by the Israeli military. My understanding is that they will be carrying out a situational assessment at about 5 or 6 in the morning to try and better understand exactly what has happened. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is at the Kiryat, which is the Israeli defense headquarters in Tel Aviv, where he has been hosting or holding a war cabinet, again trying to gauge what Israel's response will be to this unprecedented attack by the Iranians.
I think I hear another explosion there. And Alex, you mentioned missiles. Iran did say it has launched ballistic missiles as part of its attack targeting Israel. So Iran says it has. And looking at the time when
Israel said huge explosion at my place. I'm assuming in the sky
had been launched. The IDF said it would take a couple of hours, but like you mentioned, they expected most of the drones to arrive just about now, 2 a.m. in Israel and coming up to midnight here in the UK.
Yeah, that's correct. So, I mean, pretty much they had calibrated or worked out how long it would take these drones to come. They don't travel particularly fast at about 115 to 140 miles an hour. So they would have been able to track them coming into Israel and predict exactly when they came in. But of course, the hope for the Israelis is that they will be able to take most of them out of the skies, either by the fighter jets, which we've heard roar periodically overhead throughout the evening, heading in that direction towards Jordan and presumably to where these drones are coming in, and then also the air defense systems. Israel has a very, very sophisticated, technologically advanced military, very sophisticated air defense system, and of course we just saw that doing its job. The big unknown, Barbara, of course, is what the Israeli response is going to be going forwards. Now, a lot of this has to do with deterrent on both sides. You could see that in the reaction that Israel has had after October the 7th, the very destructive war that it launched on Gaza to try and destroy Hamas. The deterrent that Israel had established has been completely shattered, and part of that is trying to restore the restoration of that deterrent, which also fits with the pattern of why it targeted the consulate in Damascus, which had Iranian generals in, which is the reason that we're now seeing the Iranians retaliate. But it also comes down to deterrence for the Iranians. As far as they're concerned, they need to try and show to their people, there are domestic concerns here, that they are doing something in the face of this Israeli attack. Now, what happens next? You know, this is the big question, the big unanswered question going forwards. And, you know, we don't know. It may very well be that these drones come in. Iran has made its point. There is no damage in Israel. There is no loss of life. And this could be the end of the matter. It may very well be that this is the beginning of it. We simply don't know at this stage whether this is one attack, whether it's going to be a series of attacks. But what we can say is this attack by Iran coming from Iranian soil to Israel is unprecedented. And this really is, make no mistake, it really is an extraordinarily dangerous moment for the region.
And for viewers tuning in now, let's just explain what we're seeing. That's the skyline over Jerusalem. And we have been watching as drones coming in from Iran have been shot down by the air defense interception systems, quite a few, just over the past 15, 20 minutes or so. I mean, Alex, you were talking about how Israel's deterrence has been shattered. You know, the Israelis, of course, still traumatized by the events of October 7th. How have most people been preparing for this attack? Because even though it was announced officially about 2 hours ago, there have been, you know, rumors and speculation for at least a couple of days now.
Yeah, so we had, a couple of days ago, we had those very, very strong warnings from the American security services, which have turned out to be accurate, that there was an attack planned by the Iranians. The word that they used, it was imminent. It could come in the next couple of days. That was about 48 hours ago. And here it is. Now, I think people generally in Israel, they live with the threats. They live in a rough, dangerous neighborhood, and that's been the case pretty much since the creation of Israel in 1948. So people are, you know, at a certain extent, they're kind of used to living with that level of tension. Many people I spoke to leading up to this didn't really believe, or they hoped that it wouldn't happen. The other thing that was impressed upon me by many people I spoke to, you know, civilians out and about whilst reporting on this story, is that they also had great faith in their military and the technology that the military used, that if there was an attack, they would be able to deal with it and, if need be, counterattack. So that was the kind of response that you had from ordinary Israelis. Now, they've also had many warnings over the last 24 to 48 hours from the Israeli government, also Home Front Command as well, to make sure that they had enough supplies in, to make sure that they're not far from bomb shelters. Most houses or flats are equipped with bomb shelters in Israel. There are places that you can go to seek shelter and not to be too far away. So there is an element of preparedness here, because lots of Israelis see themselves as living really on the front line. So that, you know, they're quite used to this kind of thing. But where this goes now, I think, is the question that many people across the country will be concerned about and, you know, extremely worried about. What happens next?
Alex Rossi with the latest in Jerusalem. Alex, thank you. You're watching Sky News. The breaking news this morning: Iran has launched more than 100 drones and missiles to attack Israel. President Biden has cut short his weekend trip to Delaware and returned to Washington to deal with the crisis. Here, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has condemned the move in the strongest terms, describing it as a reckless attack against Israel. Well, our correspondent in Jerusalem has seen multiple interceptions over the city as the air raid sirens sounded. And Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is at the Kiryat, that's the military headquarters in Tel Aviv, meeting with the country's war cabinet. Israeli jets have been seen and heard patrolling the skies over Jerusalem, and Sky sources can confirm that RAF jets have been involved in the defense of Israel. Now, in a moment, we will get the latest from Washington with our U.S. correspondent there, James Matthews. But first, let's go to our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, who is in Jerusalem for us. Alex, the drones are meant to arrive roughly now, just about now. We were told by the IDF it would take them a couple of hours to arrive from Iran. Tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing over the skies of Jerusalem.
Yeah, there's been a great deal of speculation, Barbara, about what would be the targets of these drones, whether they've been followed up by cruise missiles or ballistic missiles. But we've seen over Jerusalem a number of interceptions this evening, flashes of yellow light arcing over our heads. We've heard explosions as well, what we think are interceptions. It's not clear what air defense system, whether it was the Iron Dome or another air defense system that was being used. But it's been pretty noisy here over the last half an hour. We've also throughout the evening heard the rumble of jets coming overhead as well. The Israeli military says tens of fighter jets have been in the air. Now, they have been deployed as part of the defense of the nation. They've been heading towards the drones, trying to shoot them out of the sky. It's our understanding as well from the Israeli Defense Forces that they have been in constant communication with Central Command from the United States. We know that British and American jets have also been involved in this operation as well, and we think that they have also shot down drones somewhere along the Iraqi border. Isn't clear at the moment whether this attack is over. We, of course, are waiting to see what will happen next. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as you say, has been locked in the Kiryat. He is holding a war cabinet at the moment with his ministers. Israel says it is prepared for all scenarios and it will be able to defend the nation, but will also attack as well if need be. So that there could be a response, some retaliation from the Israelis. Again, we wait to see what will happen. The danger, of course, is, one of miscalculation. Where is all of this leading? What chain of events has been set in motion? Are we heading towards some kind of regional confrontation? Now, there is a possibility that this wave of drones is taken out of the sky by both fighter jets and air defense systems. Iran has managed to make its point after the attack attributed to Israel on its consulate in Damascus on the 1st of April. And we could now have a period of de-escalation. It may very well be that Israel thinks it has to restore its deterrent after this attack, and a reprisal sees this cycle of violence spiral and get worse. The big danger, of course, is that this turns into a much wider regional war, which could, of course, suck in numerous countries. I mean, that's the big fear, the big concern across the region tonight.
And like you mentioned, Alex, not only is that the fear, but it's based on the calculation of a possible response on so many things, how many drones get through, the damage inflicted, and if there is a loss of life. Now, I just want to tell you, we have some news from the Reuters news agency from Israel's Magen David ambulance service, and they're saying that so far they've received no word of any casualty from the incoming Iranian drone. So that's an ambulance service in Israel saying so far they've received no word of any casualty from incoming Iranian drone. But I guess any loss of life, Alex, would absolutely change the calculations of an almost inevitable Israeli response.
Yeah, I mean, it does change the calculation enormously. It's just another complication to what is already a very complicated situation. We don't know what the Israeli response will be. But remember, Israel sees itself, quite rightly, as living in a dangerous, very rough neighborhood. It's had multiple threats throughout its short history since its creation in 1948. And part of establishing deterrent, in Israel's case, has often been to go on the front foot. So the question is, the drones that we've seen coming towards Israel tonight, an unprecedented attack by the Iranians, is that enough on its own to see retaliation? And then, as you were saying, brings with it the possibility of miscalculation, misstep, accident, that leads this to spiral and become an even bigger crisis. This is a really dangerous moment that we are looking at. And there are other factors, of course, Barbara, that are continuing to go on separate from the drones. There's the situation that's going on in Gaza. Israel, of course, since October the 7th and the war that it launched, has said that it wants to eradicate Hamas completely, rescue the hostages. It hasn't managed to do that. What's going on the northern border of Israel with Lebanon, that is very, very dangerous. Again, make no mistake about that. In 2006, a war was launched when a couple of Israeli soldiers were taken hostage. But now we're seeing on the northern border daily exchanges, multiple rocket fire every day happening, and this back and forth. Again, in ordinary circumstances, that would be enough to trigger a war. So there are so many different factors intersecting at this point, which could kind of create the turbulence, chain of events that leads to a much bigger regional conflagration. And that's the real danger tonight, that it just sets off a chain reaction that none of the actors involved can really understand or control, and you find yourself in this situation of a much wider, far more profound regional war, which is very, very difficult to stop.
And Alex, it may be that the situation has just got a little bit more volatile. Let me bring you news coming in from Channel 12, the Israeli TV station. They're saying senior Israeli official says there will be a significant response to the unprecedented Iranian attack. So this coming in to us via the Reuters news agency, but Israel Channel 12 TV, quoting a senior Israeli official who says there will be a significant response to unprecedented Iranian attack. I mean, Alex, back to you. You've been under the drone attack and all the drones being intercepted there in Jerusalem. But these words, significant response and unprecedented Iranian attack, don't inspire much confidence that, that tonight may be the end of it.
No, it doesn't. I mean, that really is a worrying development. We don't know what significant response means. We don't know what the Israelis will do, but certainly that is a worry for countries around the Middle East. The Egyptians have been calling for restraint on all sides because of what could happen to people, security across this region. But yeah, that is a worrying development. The Israelis, of course, will make the point that, in the face of what we have seen or what they have seen tonight, what can they do? Sit on their hands and do nothing? They say that they've been preparing for many scenarios. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has, been speaking very strongly in the last couple of days, signaling, sending very explicit warnings to the Iranians that there would be serious consequences. And I suppose what's been reflected tonight by IDF officials is they've sent these drones over here and they will respond in some shape or form. There will be a serious response. We wait to see what it is. But no, it does not bode well for the region. It doesn't bode well for the Middle East. This, is a very, very difficult moment.
It really is. Our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, with the latest there in Jerusalem. Alex, thank you. Now 2 a.m. in Jerusalem, just gone midnight here. And this was when the IDF had said most of the drones would have arrived to Israel. We have seen a lot of explosions over the skies of Jerusalem. You can see our live vision there, our live shot. And the drones that we have seen were intercepted by the air defense interception system. So we've been hearing drones, sirens, and explosions over the skies of Jerusalem. You can see the latest pictures there of drones being intercepted. So that is what is happening in the Middle East, in Israel, in Jerusalem specifically. Let's go to Washington now and our correspondent, James Matthews. Now, James, a couple of hours ago, we saw President Joe Biden return to the White House. He's been meeting with his national security advisors in the Situation Room at the White House, obviously, I guess, watching those images coming out of Israel.
Yeah, watching them very keenly, Barbara. And they will watch these pictures tomorrow morning. I think that will be the test, the daylight pictures of the damage, civilian casualties, if that's what comes to pass, and the extent, the full extent of this Iranian attack, not just in intent, but also in the harm and the damage that it inflicts. I think that will be the test of how far the United States, in conjunction with Israel, feels it has to respond. I think the dark news from that Israeli statement you read is that it's not going to be ignored by Israel. Whatever significant reaction means, there will be a reaction or a response from the Israelis. But I think that will be measured maybe differently by the United States and Israel. That will be measured according to what these countries feel they have to do in terms of responding in a way that is regarded as robust and effective and as a deterrent to future attack, not just by Iran, but also other adversaries in the Middle East. Joe Biden, he cut short his weekend break in Rehoboth Beach, arrived back at the White House a couple of hours ago. He is in talks with his national security officials in the Situation Room, America's war cabinet, and they will undoubtedly be communicating with the Israeli war cabinet, which is meeting simultaneously. They have much clearly to discuss. They will be assessing an ongoing operation, and it's an operation involving the United States, obviously, with naval assets as well as land-based assets. Essentially, they are helping the Israelis in knocking these drones and missiles out of the sky. We're told by officials that the US military has already shot down some Iranian drones, and it's also fired interceptors to take out Iranian missiles that were fired tonight. We're awaiting confirmation as to whether or not they have hit any of those. But Joe Biden clearly does not want an escalation in this conflict. And it's worth noting, I think, Barbara, that as long ago as last week, members of Congress were invited to a briefing about Iran's plans tonight. The intelligence was laid out, and indeed we were reading articles about the movement of missiles, drones, and so on. The United States knew this attack was coming. And I suppose a relevant question, a pertinent question, is why didn't they launch, or why didn't Israel launch, a preemptive strike? I think that feeds into the theory that they are waiting to see or to assess just how big an attack this is. Is this a significant, deadly attack that Iran regards as a trigger for an escalated war itself, or is it actually something that won't have much impact, which is merely launched for the Iranian government to save face, to say to its people, an unpopular regime, remember, to demonstrate to its people it has power, it is anti-Israel, it can respond to attacks, the like of which triggered this incident in the first place, the bombing of an Iranian consulate in Damascus. Is it a question of saving face, 100 drones that may or may not inflict severe damage, and Iran hoping that it all goes away? I have to tell you, the Iranian mission to the United Nations has tweeted within the past hour or so, which might reflect the fact that Iran actually very much doesn't want this to go away now that it's fired off its drones. It talks about Article 51 of the UN Charter pertaining to legitimate defence. This is the Iranian mission to the UN. It said, Iran's military action was in response to the Zionist regime's aggression against our diplomatic premises in Damascus. The matter can be deemed concluded. However, should the Israeli regime make another mistake, Iran's response will be considerably more severe. It's a conflict between Iran and the rogue Israeli regime from which the US must stay away, it says. So that's what Iran is saying right now, having fired its drone. It thinks, or it would wish an end to this now. I suppose the difficulty for them and the difficulty for all of us is that Israel and the United States may have other thoughts on where the conflict goes from here.
James, stay with us. I just have some breaking news I'd like to bring you. So it comes from the Reuters news agency, and that's that U.S. jets downed a number of drones in Soweda and Daraa provinces in southern Syria, near the Jordanian border. That's according to security sources from the Reuters news agency. U.S. jets downed a number of drones in Soweda and Daraa provinces. That is in southern Syria. So, James, we can see sort of the involvement there of U.S. jets, and we've also had our own confirmation, the RAF as well, not this specific incident, but this evening shooting down drones. And then you mentioned that statement, James, from the Iranian delegation at the UN. Well, after that came a statement from a senior Israeli official. This is on the Israel Channel 12, and the senior Israeli official saying that there will be a significant response to unprecedented Iranian attacks that we have seen tonight. So certainly not language that one would assume points to a de-escalation. James, looking specifically at the US, no country wants an escalation anywhere in the Middle East or any of the Western nations. But tell us a little bit about the specific dynamics for Joe Biden. He's obviously a man who's facing an election in November, and we have seen a lot of anger in the United States, especially among his base, among many young Democrats, about what they see as a sort of an unjustified killing of civilians in Gaza. So what are the specific dynamics for him at this precise moment?
The dynamics are defining, frankly, Barbara, for him. You're right to say that he has been damaged amongst the Democratic Party base, and we saw that in recent primary elections in places like Michigan, where there's a large Arab American population, and they have turned their back on Joe Biden because of his policy or actions on Gaza. He has been roundly criticized as ineffective, not influential enough to prevent an unfolding catastrophe. For a man who sells himself as a world statesman, a steward, who is a power broker in tinderbox regions like the Middle East, his critics point to the Israel-Hamas conflict and criticize him as being powerless to prevent everything that has gone on there. And it's a developing problem. It has developed over 6 months. It will develop further, of course, should there be an escalation in this conflict, because never mind no ceasefire, no release of the remaining hostages, no end to the Israel-Hamas conflict, no end to the catastrophe in Gaza, there will be an escalated conflict, a widened theatre of war that Biden's critics will deem him to have mismanaged. And of course, critic-in-chief is Donald Trump. He was quoted only a few days ago, talking tough on Israel, saying it's time that Israel ended this war. He talks tough, Donald Trump, when it comes to the Ukraine conflict, saying it's something he could end within 24 hours. And, you know, he derives support from that. Donald Trump presents himself as the strongman president who, you know, confidently strides the world, wielding American power, as many Americans perceive it to be. Biden, not so much. Different guy, more of a manager, less of a warmonger who treads delicately with a view to achieving results. His difficulty is that he needs a result in the Middle East, and that is going to be clearly far more difficult should this conflict escalate. And we've seen, you know, American reaction so far. It's been defensive militarily. You mentioned the US jets bringing down missiles. There are US jets in the area, of course, operating off Navy vessels which are in the area. The USS Carney, a destroyer, that was actually on its way back to the United States. It's been involved in shooting down Houthi missiles, but having headed home, it's turned back with a view to taking part in this particular event. And also US bases around the Middle East, they've had their security beefed up as a result of drone attacks in the recent past. So all of those assets are being dedicated to the defense of Israel tonight as we speak. America very much involved in this, very much at the heart of what is a defensive operation tonight. The question, of course, is when it turns into an attack operation, and Israel is talking that way, to what extent is it an attack operation? To what extent is the United States involved in that? Possibly not very much unless there is a real conflagration, unless Hezbollah become involved, unless we're talking about something far more than the drone attacks tonight. Troops, Hezbollah, trouble on the north border of Israel. If Israel is seen to be overwhelmed, then the United States will weigh in big style, bigger style than it would like, probably bigger style than it's planning right now.
James, stay with us. I've just got some breaking news coming in from the U.S. Embassy in Israel. Now, they have directed all U.S. government employees, family members, to shelter in place until further notice. So the U.S. Embassy in Israel directing all U.S. government employees and family members to shelter in place until further notice. And James, obviously, a little earlier when we were speaking to Alex Rossi, our international correspondent in Jerusalem, we could see a lot of those drones sort of in the Jerusalem skyline and being intercepted by the air defense system. But of course, there is the worry, isn't there, James, that not only some drones might get through, that they could cause a damage, and worst of all, of course, loss of life, not just for the loss of life itself, obviously, but also because of what that would do to the risk of a proper escalation and a bigger Israeli response.
Yeah, loss of life, that's the thing. Civilian casualties, isn't it, Barbara? Because if we wake up tomorrow morning and we are looking at mass casualties as a result of this offence, of this event tonight, then the governments involved will feel a compulsion to respond in kind, and that's where escalation lies. Something short of escalation might lie in these drones actually not hitting their intended targets and not going anywhere. We've already heard that US jets have taken a few out of the sky. Bear in mind, there are considerable aerial defences already in Israel. And earlier, I was telling you that US officials were of the view that the targets for these drones, now this is what they're saying, we will find out in due course, but US officials, their expectation is that the targets are not civilian sites, they're not religious sites, but they are government sites, government buildings. And government buildings in Israel will be the buildings most secure and most protected by aerial defences. So it may transpire, and we don't know clearly until we see it, it may transpire that these drones are effectively taken out of the sky by effective defences. We wake up tomorrow and, there are limited casualties. There is limited fallout from this attack, in which case maybe the temperature is reduced. And maybe we have a scenario like the engagement with the Houthi Iranian proxies that we've had over the past few months. You'll remember at the time when America was responding to Houthi attacks, there was talk of crisis then, talk of serious escalation. Nobody talks so much about that anymore. Yes, there has been continuing engagement with the Houthis, but it's continued at a low level. There has been military engagement, but it hasn't been a serious escalation, hasn't taken attention away from the Israel-Hamas conflict, the military imperative, the politics, the necessity and the job of Joe Biden and others to sort that out, free hostages and secure a ceasefire and so on. That would be the scenario, I imagine, best case for the Americans as they watch unfolding events. And I think, as I was saying, they've seen this attack coming. The fact they didn't get stuck in before these drones and these missiles were fired would indicate to me that they have been in defensive mode throughout. And I imagine that's where they are right now. Whether that flips will depend on what happens overnight and the pictures that we see tomorrow. But again, as you said, Israel is talking about significant reaction. There will be a reaction. The question is, how significant is the reaction itself, and how significant is that for escalation and for the region?
And as you say, James, we're going to have a clearer idea of that tomorrow morning as to what the impact of this drone attack has been. James Matthews, our U.S. correspondent, with the latest there from Washington. James, for the moment, thank you. Let's go back to the Middle East, because the Israeli Defense Force has issued a warning to some residents to take shelter. Now, specifically, warning residents of the northern Golan Heights and the areas of Nevatim, Dimona, and Eilat. People living in those locations have been advised to stay near protective spaces until further notice. Well, let's bring you the comments that Israel's army spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, made a little earlier as he warned the people of Israel that Iran had launched drones and missiles targeting their country.
Alarm is operated where you're at. You must go into the sheltered area and remain there for 10 minutes at least, no less than that. We will update you if it is necessary to stay there longer. I would like to call upon you to refrain from spreading any unconfirmed rumors. Please stick only to the official instructions of the IDF spokesperson's unit and the Homefront Command. I will come on air to update if anything changes. Please remain calm and collected as you've been so far, and remember to follow the instructions. The IDF is well prepared. All of its elements, both on the defensive and on the offensive, are prepared. We have prepared for diverse scenarios in advance. We operate in close collaboration with the U.S. and our other partners in the region in order to intercept these launches. We have the circles of protection from both the Navy and the Air Force on several layers, and we have additional circles of protection from the U.S. military. We have an excellent air defense system, and it is now in full operation. But you must remember, it's never 100% the defensive measures. So therefore, it's always very important to follow the instructions of the Homefront Command. These save lives. Questions. Channel 12 News, the UAVs have been launched. When will we hear the sirens? As I've told you, I inform you about the fact that these UAVs have been launched. It will take them several hours to reach Israel. We are going to try to prevent them from reaching Israeli territory. That is our task. If they do enter Israeli airspace, then you will hear sirens and alarms wherever these threats enter, and we will intercept them in these areas. If there is a different kind of threat on a different timetable, we will inform you immediately on all platforms, and I will also come on TV to update you. Another question, why is the Prime Minister's aircraft in the air? We have operational reasons and considerations, and it's true for our airspace, it's true for any disruptions, and it's also true regarding the various aircrafts, including the Knaf Zion. Channel 14 News, are you considering any preventive measures against Iran or Hezbollah in view of these threats? I'm not going to detail here our preparations and our scenarios. We will do whatever is necessary in order to defend Israeli citizens wherever it is necessary. I'd like to repeat once again, I will come again if there is a need to update you.
Well, the Defense Secretary, Grant Shapps, has just tweeted. Now, he says additional Royal Air Force jets and air refueling tankers have been deployed to the Middle East to bolster Operation Shader, the UK's existing counter-Daesh, or ISIL, operation in Iraq and Syria. In addition, the jets will intercept airborne attacks within range of our existing missions. And then Grant Shapps goes on to say, my statement, I strongly condemn the senseless airborne attack that Iran has launched on Israel. It serves no benefit other than to further undermine regional security. We continue to work with Israel and partners in the region to prevent further escalation. Peace and stability are in everyone's interest, and I urge Iran to immediately end all forms of destabilizing behavior. In response to escalation in the region and in partnership with our allies, the Prime Minister and I have authorized the deployment of additional Royal Air Force assets. The RAF jets and air refueling tankers will bolster our existing Operation Shader, which is the UK's existing counter-Daesh operation in Iraq and Syria. In addition, these jets will intercept any airborne attacks within range of our existing missions as required. So that was a statement from Grant Shapps. Earlier, we also heard from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. As a statement, he condemned Iran's actions. This is what his statement said. I condemn in the strongest terms the Iranian regime's reckless attack against Israel. These strikes risk inflaming tensions and destabilizing the region. Iran has once again demonstrated that it is intent on sowing chaos in its own backyard. The UK will continue to stand up for Israel's security and that of all of our regional partners, including Jordan and Iraq. Alongside our allies, we are urgently working to stabilize the situation and prevent further escalation. No one wants to see more bloodshed. Well, our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, has this up some from all the reaction from Westminster.
Well, Rishi Sunak was the first European leader to respond and has offered staunch support for Israel in his statement. He said tonight, I condemn in the strongest terms the Iranian regime's reckless attack against Israel. These strikes risk inflaming tensions and destabilizing the region. He said Iran has once again demonstrated that it is intent on sowing chaos in its own backyard. The UK will continue to stand up for Israel's security and that of our regional partners, including Jordan and Iraq. Alongside our allies, we are urgently working to stabilise the situation and prevent further escalation. No one wants to see more bloodshed. What does Rishi Sunak mean by working with our allies to stabilise the situation? Well, the government have not yet commented on reports that we're getting from the region that UK fighter jets, we have air bases, of course, in Cyprus, might be involved in trying to intercept some of these attacks coming from Iran. We have not had any confirmation of that yet. We may well get it in the coming hours, but there are reports from the region that UK jets may be involved. We've also had a statement from the opposition leader, Keir Starmer, which very much reflects similar sentiment to Rishi Sunak. He said that the international community has been urging restraint, and yet again he said Iran has chosen a dangerous path. We continue to stand up for Israel's security, he says, and that the Labour Party supports all measures designed to restore calm. We won't really know what those are until we see the full scale of this and understand what exactly the UK and others' involvement might be. Certainly there's been deep concern about this in government. We know that Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, spoke to the Iranian Foreign Minister just 2 days ago, urging Iran not to escalate into what he called a wider war. Clearly those warnings have gone unheeded, and the UK will be urgently talking to allies in the next few hours about what this escalation might mean and, of course, what role Western countries can play, most probably in supporting the US in the next steps. But staunch support for Israel from Rishi Sunak and wanting to help Britain's allies in the region to take all the steps that they can to restore calm.
And you can see live shots there of both southern Israel and Tel Aviv. No visible drones there now, unlike what we saw over the skies of Jerusalem about an hour ago. Let me just bring you reaction from President Biden. Now, he tweeted, first of all, these are the pictures that you're seeing there of a meeting that Joe Biden was having with his national security advisors in the Situation Room at the White House. Joe Biden returned to Washington earlier on Saturday afternoon. He had been away in Delaware, obviously, to talk about the escalating situation in the Middle East. President Biden tweeted just recently, this is what he said. He said, I just met with my national security team for an update on Iran's attacks against Israel. Our commitment to Israel's security against threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. So that statement from President Biden, not a lot of detail there, and really reiterating this word that's been used before about the U.S. support for Israel, and the word he used is ironclad. Now, a little earlier, I spoke to the U.S. national security and foreign policy analyst, Ari Aramesh.
The Iranian government is now reacting and retaliating against the Israelis, killing their key operator. The Quds Forces is the external operation branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. That's the Iranian, sort of the second Iranian military that is more ideological. It has some elite units. And if the IRGC has an air force, has a ground force, and has a navy, it also has a Quds Force. That's its external operation. The deputy commander, General Zahedi, Brigadier General Zahedi, who was killed at the Iranian consulate a few days ago in Damascus, is a highly valuable military and also sort of tactical and strategic figure for the Iranian leadership. I would say this is probably the most important loss for Iran, for Iranian regime, since the killing of Major General Qasem Soleimani, the former head of the IRGC, who was killed by the U.S. on January 3rd, 2020. It's a huge blow. So now they're retaliating. President Biden told the Iranians not to do it. The U.S. stands firmly behind Israel. The question is, A, how much damage these attacks are going to cause. Second, well, let me back up. The most important question is this it? Is this the only wave of attacks? These suicide drones and some missiles that Iran so far has launched, is there going to be another wave? Is Iran going to use its proxies? Hezbollah to Israel's north has hundreds of thousands of rockets and tens of thousands of missiles. And so if they start launching theirs, let's say in coordination with other proxies in the region, if the Hamas has been pretty much decapitated in Gaza, so they are really not in a position to do much from southern Israel. But so the first question is that it? Is there going to be another wave, either from Iran or Iran's proxies? Second question is, where are these drones and missiles going? We don't exactly know where they're going to land. Iran has said they have these predetermined locations, but I don't have a lot of faith in the accuracy. Even if they did, have certain places in mind, I don't have a lot of faith in the accuracy of their delivery technology. And third is really reaction. How is Israel going to react? This is the first time since the Yom Kippur War of 1973, with one little exception. That's Saddam launching missiles in January of 1991. But this is the first time a state has actually attacked Israel without any U.S. involvement, without any secondary or other war. In 1991, there was the Gulf War, and Saddam launched missiles. But this is the first time since 1973, and we have to see how Israel reacts.
Mr. Aramesh, before this happened, well, actually, just before the attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, there were huge tensions between the two allies, Israel and the United States, and obviously that came from what many in the U.S. saw as an excessive level of civilian death in Gaza. Then, of course, there was the killing of the aid workers, one of them an American. Ultimately, how much sway do you think the United States will have in the coming hours and days over Israel in their response to this Iranian attack?
Let's not forget, when Israel is under attack, the United States closes ranks and fully supports Israel. As in the words of President Biden and National Security Advisor and for a second I am now forgetting his name. The U.S. support for Israel is ironclad. So Jake Sullivan, I'm sorry, that's right in front of you, and you miss his name, Jake Sullivan. So the U.S. support for Israel is ironclad. What does that mean, ironclad? Ironclad means when Israel's security and its existence and its safety comes under question and is jeopardized, the United States, as Israel's most important, largest, most powerful, and only guarantor, puts aside its grievances, puts aside its differences, and supports Israel. That's U.S. policy, Democratic or Republican administrations. Yes,
that is obviously official U.S. policy, but behind the scenes, considering that for the past few months, really, since the start of the war between Israel and Hamas, we haven't really seen Israel listen to the United States. I wonder whether you think that whatever it is that the U.S. will now say to Israel behind closed doors, whether you think Israel will actually listen.
I think the advice from the Biden administration would be for Israel to show restraint. Now, Israel has a right to defend itself, but the Biden administration's policy generally is try to de-escalate. Any escalatory sort of approach or action that would cause a reaction is something that this administration does not favor. Having said that, you have to create a balance between de-escalation and deterrence. Sometimes when you try to de-escalate too much, for instance, for months, we tried to de-escalate with the Iranians in Iraq and Syria. They escalated until they killed 3 Army National Guard troops in Jordan when they sent those suicide drones. And then the U.S. retaliated, paused that situation. How much sway does the U.S. have over the Netanyahu administration? You know, more than any other country. Let's put it this way. I'm not going to quantify and give you a number, but more than any other country. The U.S. is obviously Israel's larger supporter and provider of weapons, technology, intelligence. And again, in times of crises, the two countries get a lot closer to each other. Remember, after October 7th, President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, Secretary of Lloyd Austin, they all flew there. President Biden went to the war zone, went to Tel Aviv, went to Jerusalem, met with high cabinet leaders. But again, I understand that people expect the U.S. to dictate terms to Israel. You know, the U.S. doesn't dictate terms to South Korea or Japan or Germany or other allies for that matter. So why would anyone expect us to dictate terms to Israel? Yes, we have some leverage, we have some influence like two allies do, but you shouldn't expect the United States to dictate how Israel should run its war. But again, they are allies. And at the end of the day, you got to back up your ally when it comes under direct assault and threat by a rogue regime.
Mr. Aramesh, speaking of allies, let's bring in a statement that we've just had on Twitter from the Foreign Secretary, the British Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, saying Iran's reckless attacks on Israel will only further inflame tensions in the Middle East. The UK calls on the Iranian regime to stop this serious escalation, which is in no one's interest. So that comment coming in from David Cameron, echoing similar words that we heard from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Mr. Aramesh, very briefly, if you're still there, I mean, how worried do you think ultimately the United States will be about the developments that we're seeing in the Middle East? I mean, you say it's not for them to dictate rules to Israel on how to handle their affairs, but if it does lead to a regional war, obviously the U.S. is implicated.
Yeah, this is going to have ramifications for all of us. We have major bases in the Middle East, in Qatar, in Bahrain, troops all over the region, from Jordan and Kuwait all the way to Egypt and Saudi and Kuwait and UAE, you name it. There isn't a country that U.S. doesn't support and help with its security. And U.S. troops you have special operations forces in Syria and Iraq. You have conventional forces in other places. And then if this war escalates and gets out of control, let's say it becomes a real hot conventional war, the two sides launching missiles, and the Iranians don't have much of an air force. They have sort of their main defense is their missiles and their proxies, their missile system, their proxies. But if the Israelis start launching a major campaign, the U.S. is going to get involved, and I think the de-escalation is no longer going to work. So I hope cooler heads would prevail.
Ari Aramesh speaking to me a little bit earlier. Okay, you can see the live shots there of southern Israel and Tel Aviv. Let's also bring you some breaking news, a statement that we're getting from the Iranian Foreign Ministry. Let me read it to you. It says, Tehran will not hesitate to take further defensive measures to safeguard its legitimate interests against any military aggression. So this coming in from the Iranian Foreign Ministry, a statement saying Tehran will not hesitate to take further defensive measures to safeguard its legitimate interests against any military aggressions. Well, I'm joined now by Harley Littman from the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee in New York to discuss the developments further. First of all, sir, your reaction, please, to the statement by the Iranian Foreign Ministry that I just read out, but just in general to the events of the past few hours.
Well, what's quite remarkable is that there's always been a red line between Iran and Israel, that neither country directly attacks each other. That red line is gone, which means Iran could just attack Israel another time, even if they're stopping now, because it appears that this is the extent of their actions against Israel, that they're not going to do any more. That's the indications I'm hearing from the Iranian government. Iran does not want a war. What they want to do is punish Israel. Now, from Israel's perspective, this opens up an opportunity, because since Israel was attacked and now there are no more red lines, Israel could attack Iran. And they may be surprised by the Iranian attack, and they may not launch a major attack against Iran, but Israel has a lot of options that they're debating. One is to do something immediately to show deterrence. Some predict they'll hit back as much as 10 times as hard. Or, and they may not do it right away, the window of opportunity to attack Iran's nuclear facilities is now open. And I suspect that this is something that's going to be discussed in Israel. And if I were living in an Iranian nuclear facility, I'd be wearing a hard helmet right now.
Sir, we obviously don't know the scope of the damage of this drone attack so far. We don't know if any have got through, what the damage is, crucially, if there's been any loss of life, and realistically, we're not going to get a clearer picture for a couple of hours. Do you think that that changes the equation, or do you think the mere symbolism that Iran attacked Israel the way that it has is enough for Israel to have to respond in a very strong manner?
I think Israel has to respond in a strong manner, and they will. What everybody has to realize is that Iran has been attacking Israel for years and has declared war on Israel privately, covertly. What makes this noteworthy is only that it's now in the open. Who is supplying the weapons to Hezbollah when Hezbollah fires rockets into Israel? It's Iran supplying the weapons, and it's Iran that's managing Hezbollah's decisions. The same thing with the Hamas attack. While it was implemented by Hamas on October 7th, it was orchestrated by Iran. So Iran is behind all. If you look at any of the violence, the firing of missiles from the Houthi to any conflict that you see in the Middle East, it's coming from Iran, and they're flooding the West Bank with weapons. So this is a huge, major escalation. And I think that the good news is the United States and England have stepped up and have shot down many of the drones. But if the drones hit a major facility, I think all hell will break loose. I don't know how directionally precise these drones are going to be. The fact that they fire drones is quite interesting because they're slow moving and they're easier to shoot down, which could suggest that they're being limited as much as in their ambitions, as much as they attacked Israel.
Sir, forgive me for interrupting you, but let me just bring something that we heard from the Iranian mission at the UN about an hour ago, saying Iran, this is their statement, Iran's military action was in response to the Zionist regime, that's what they call Israel, the Zionist regime's aggression against our diplomatic premises in Damascus. the matter can be deemed concluded. So this is a statement from the Iranian mission at the UN, because you brought in, obviously the attack of October 7th and the West Bank. They have different dynamics. This is specifically a confrontation between Iran and Israel. When you see that statement and the Iranian mission at the UN saying that potentially this is their response to the attack at the consulate and it can be deemed concluded, do you see in that the hope that actually things could be allowed to settle down a little?
Well, that's exactly what I was saying, that they don't want an all-out war. The fact that they said it's concluded, and that's what I was referring to earlier when I said the information I'm getting from Iran is that this is only one attack and then they're going to stop.
If they don't want an all-out war, then what does Israel want? Does Israel want an all-out war with Iran?
I don't think Israel wants an all-out war, but Israel cannot let this be unanswered. If Israel doesn't respond, it will make Israel appear very weak in that region. It will embolden Iran, and they're likely to do it again. It's not likely they're going to stop. They will do it again. And in that part of the world, unfortunately, you need to show strength if you want to have peace. If Israel, I know that instinctively we want to say, let's calm things down. But as I said earlier, Iran has been attacking Israel for years. They're the ones responsible in giving the weapons and the directions for all these attacks. So even though they fired at Israel, they only want to calm things down for the moment. But they've unleashed a new development by attacking Israel. And Israel has no choice. And I think it's, as I said, it's a window of opportunity, because the only way you're ever going to have peace in that region is if you have regime change, because this is an apocalyptic regime with a messianic view of the world. They want carnage. They want death. This is how they all go to heaven. So I'm not even sure they're rational actors there. And by the way, by attacking Israel, they now brought Israel and the United States close together, where Israel and the United States was having a lot of friction and a lot of disagreements that were getting very, very challenging. In one swoop, they just bonded Israel and the United States in a way that wouldn't have happened without this. So the unintended consequence of this is that Israel and the United States is very aligned. And with that in place, while the United States may counsel restraint to Israel, which they probably will, Israel, I am sure that Israel will respond. And they're debating now, I think, how severe and how forceful, but they will do it. And I think in that part of the world, they have to do that to maintain that deterrence, or they'll be attacked again, even more so.
Sir, you mentioned regime change in Iran. There's a lot of people that would like to see leadership change in Israel itself. Benjamin Netanyahu, very unpopular for a variety of reasons, not being able to prevent October 7th and the issue of the hostages. I mean, these are enormous decisions that the Israeli war cabinet is about to make that would have an impact beyond the country and the wider region. So do you think that Benjamin Netanyahu is the right person to be at the helm of this?
It's not for me or you to decide. They are a democracy. The same way England's a democracy. It's up to the citizens of Israel to do that.
Thousands of people have been turning out, in fairness, against Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel because it is a democracy and they have the right to do so.
Well, whether he is the right person or not, he's the prime minister. So it's in his hands. And actually, they're playing into his hands by attacking Israel. Now, if a nation is attacked, they have a right to defend themselves. They ask Israel to stand down and not do anything because Iran stopped. I mean, that's like people coming up, shooting up your house, and then saying, oh, we don't want to do anything anymore, but you can't respond to that. I mean, who would just do nothing in response? I know we all crave peace, but the truth is, you're comparing apples and oranges. Israel has no grievance with Iran. It's Iran that has a grievance with Israel, that has stated many times they want to destroy Israel. And people need to address that directly. I think we're all in denial, and Europe in particular, I think, has an appeasement mentality. They're kind of like, peace at all costs, don't fight back, don't do anything, no violence. And that's fine if the other side would agree to that. But you have a regime that is bent on colonial imperialistic control of the Middle East. They're in Syria, Iraq. Do you think the Syrians and Iraqis want them there? They have control of Yemen. Iran is the ones that are creating the violence and the deaths. Israel just wants to exist. And whether you like Bibi Netanyahu or not, you can't scapegoat this on him. This has nothing to do with him. This is about Iran trying to destroy another nation.
Harley Littman, we're going to have to leave it there from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee in New York. Sir, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And now let's go to our military analyst, Sean Bell, who I spoke to a little bit earlier.
One of the things that to remember about the drones, whilst they are a bit more of a terror weapon, most of them are relatively easy to shoot down. The Shahed 136, which the Iranian drones they've been providing to Russia, they only fly around about 140 miles an hour, and they are not that difficult to shoot down. The value of them, though, is that they create a sort of a volume, a quantity of weapons flying through the air, and therefore that provides cover for the cruise missiles, ballistic missiles that are also incoming. Now, the air defences that Israel has and that the US helped provide should mitigate some of that, but inevitably these ballistic missiles are particularly difficult to get through. And I think, as some of the correspondents have been talking about, some of the key here will be just how much damage has been done. Iran, there's a lot of questions here. Iran has been put on the horns of a dilemma, because after Israel attacked that consulate building on the 1st of April, killing 13 people, including a senior military commander, Iran was almost duty-bound to do some sort of reaction. Israel would have known that. The fact is, waited some time for doing it, and as generally experience shows, it's quite measured. It will be interesting to see what they've targeted, how many telephone warnings coming in. We're already hearing some of that there's been some coordination between America and Iran. And if there has been coordination, Iran will be trying to make a point, but we'd be very clearly not wanting to escalate. And I think one of the things that most military analysts see here is that Iran has got a fledgling nuclear program. It will not want to have that program attacked. It will not want to provide an excuse to the Israelis or the Americans for attacking those programs, because ultimately, and it's not if, it's when Iran gets nuclear weapons, they would be the ultimate deterrent against both Israel and the US. So I think there's clearly a lot going on behind the scenes here. The key will be as to how many of these missiles get through, what they're actually targeting, whether there were warnings being advised first, and then how much America tries to mitigate and measure Israel's natural instinct to respond.
Obviously, tensions between Israel and Iran go back decades, but we have seen, everything get more intense, more fragile since the latest escalation in the conflict between Hamas and Israel in Gaza. Militarily speaking, what is Israel's situation right now, in the sense that it's still involved in a military operation in Gaza, but now is having quite serious attacks coming in from other parts of the border?
Yeah, it's interesting trying to look at the sequence of this. From a military perspective, Israel had its foot on the throat of Hamas outside Rafah, and you would generally not let up. Netanyahu's been clear he wants to deal with the 4 last battalions of Hamas fighters left in Rafah, and yet he's moved his battalions out, and left simply 1 IDF battalion left behind. And there's lots of questions why that was happening. Was it a break? Was it a breather? But there are big bodies of the Israel government who actually want to deal with Hamas, but they also want to deal with Hezbollah. And of course, the dark shadow of Iran, as many of your viewers will know, has been around. They provide weapons, training, support to not only Hamas, Hezbollah, and also the Houthis, who've been causing carnage in the Red Sea as well. And that must all be incredibly frustrating for Israel. The challenge, of course, is what do you do about it? And I think one of the things that the security guys were particularly concerned about was if Israel did respond to having a go at Hezbollah in the north. The last time that happened, Lebanon suffered tremendously, and there was a sort of stalemate at the end of it. Lots of people died, lots of carnage. It looks likely that despite the fact Israel is the dominant military power in the region, it still would be probably folly to allow this to escalate. And I think that's why we're seeing the US trying to bring its influence to bear to try and moderate. It is the ultimate security guarantor for Israel, but it's not in US's interest to see this conflict escalate either. So it'll be interesting to see over the coming hours just how much grand statesmanship is involved to try to mitigate this whole rather very dangerous situation.
You're watching Sky News. The breaking news this morning: Iran has launched more than 100 drones as well as missiles to attack Israel. President Biden has cut short his weekend trip to Delaware and returned to Washington to meet with his national security team. And the U.S. Embassy in Israel has directed all U.S. employees to shelter in place until further notice. Well, here, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has condemned the move in the strongest terms, describing it as a reckless attack against Israel. And our correspondent is in Jerusalem and has seen multiple interceptions over the city as those air raid sirens sounded. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is at the Kiryat, the military headquarters in Tel Aviv, with the country's war cabinet. Israeli jets have been seen patrolling the skies over Jerusalem, and Sky sources can confirm that RAF jets have been involved in the defense of Israel. And in just the last few moments, we've had a statement from the Iranian Foreign Ministry, who say Tehran will not hesitate to take further defensive measures to safeguard its legitimate interests against any military aggressions. Well, let's bring in our international correspondent, Alex Rossi, now, who's in Jerusalem. And Alex, over the last hour or so, you've been hearing sirens and seeing some explosions as those anti-air defense systems kick in against those drone attacks. Do tell us what you've been seeing and what the latest on the situation there is.
Well, good evening. It's 3 o'clock in the morning here in Jerusalem. And about an hour and a half ago, we started to hear jets coming across the skies, and the Israeli military were predicting at about 2 o'clock the drones, this phalanx of drones that had been launched from Iran towards Israel, would start to come into Israeli airspace. And we saw interceptions, flashes of light arcing above us, as we assume those drones were taken out of the sky. Missiles have also been launched as well. Now, that was accompanied by the sound of sirens wailing across the city of Jerusalem. This was something that was replicated across Israel as well. Now, we're hearing from the Iranian UN mission that their military action, they say, has now been concluded. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is at the Kiryat, the Israeli defense headquarters. He's holding a war cabinet. Israeli officials are saying that there will be a serious response to this unprecedented attack from the Iranians. So this may not be the end of it. It may be that we see some sort of response from the Israelis, which kind of triggers a chain reaction, a cycle of escalation. But again, they may show restraint. We don't know at this point what exactly their response will be. But this is an enormously dangerous moment for the Middle East. Now, people across Israel have been warned to stay very close to shelters. Many people, of course, will have gone into those shelters tonight, hearing the sirens in their towns and cities. Educational activities have also been cancelled for school children in the days ahead, because the fear is there may be another attack from the Iranians, even though they say it has concluded. The retaliation from the Iranians is, of course, from an airstrike attributed to Israel happening on April the 1st, which hit a consulate in Damascus, killing a number of senior generals from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Iran has been vowing a response to that, and tonight we saw that response. Now, Israel has been on tenterhooks Really, for the last 48 hours, there have been warnings from the United States security agencies that an attack was imminent, and tonight we saw the shape and form of that attack.
Yeah, Alex, and so far, certainly it does seem as those air defences have kicked in and they have worked. No reports of any casualties so far, but the language between Iran and Israel remains heightened. No signs of a de-escalation so far between the two.
No, there's no direct communication between the Iranians and the Israelis. It's all done through back channels. I mean, look, there is a best scenario where this attack happened. Iran can show to its domestic audience, project across the region that it responded to what it sees as a really grave attack, the attack on the consulate. And this may be the end of it. But what we're hearing from the Israeli officials, it doesn't sound like that. It says that there will be a serious response. This, remember, is an unprecedented attack on Israeli soil, and they may very well feel, for reasons of their own deterrence, that they need to react for it. It will be very interesting to see what the United States, or to hear what the United States is saying privately to Israeli officials, because of course they don't want this to erupt into a major regional confrontation. And that's the real danger here, that this spins into a regional war and drags in multiple countries. We're hearing from the Egyptians. They are calling for restraints on all sides, but you know, this is a very destabilizing moment in the Middle East, coming at a time, of course, after the October the 7th attacks. There's a war raging in Gaza. Israel is vowing to destroy Hamas, rescue its hostages. It hasn't finished doing that. That's still going on. Again, that's extremely volatile. And then on the northern border with Israel, Hezbollah, a paramilitary organization from Lebanon, there are daily exchanges of fire there. That in itself is enough to ignite, under ordinary circumstances, to ignite a regional war. And there's no sign of any end to that either. Tonight, we know that Hezbollah fired a barrage of missiles again into Israel. Again, that is inflaming the general situation. Make no mistake, this is an extraordinarily dangerous moment.
Yeah, and Israel's allies have been at the forefront tonight in shooting down some of those drones, both the US and the UK saying that they were involved in shooting down some drones before they could make it to Israeli territory. How much of an influence does the Biden administration have over Netanyahu here, and how much can those behind-the-scenes conversations help to de-escalate the situation?
Well, let's start with the planes this evening. We heard warplanes overhead. According to the IDF, tens of fighter jets have been up in the skies. They've been heading outside Israeli airspace. We saw them fly over our heads in the direction of Jordan earlier on this evening. And they have been tasked with defending the nation, trying to take these drones out before they reached Israeli soil. Now, according to the IDF, they have been coordinating their response with US Central Command, as have the British fighter jets have also been up in the air, and they have taken out some of the drones, as have US fighter jets. The level of leverage or influence that the Americans will have on the Israelis, it's really hard to say. Certainly, the relationship between the two countries has been frayed as a result of the very high civilian casualties in Gaza. The Americans have urged the Israelis, particularly President Biden, to show restraint. He has gone on the record and said a number of times that he doesn't think the war is being conducted in a proper way because of the mounting civilian casualties. He's also warned them of going into Rafah in the southern part of the Strip, which is one of the last refuges of where Hamas are holed up. So, you know, the relationship is a very difficult one. One thing to say, because the Americans and also the British have come to the defense of Israel tonight, that might have some bearing on what they do in terms of their response. That may give them some leverage. But again, I take you back to what I was saying earlier. This is, you know, it's an unprecedented attack on Israel, and